I am Dr. Deborah Vanal. I'm a licensed therapist in California, and today I am here with a therapist who came undone,
Hi.
who's obviously also a therapist from her name, practicing in the other side of the country in Virginia,
Yeah,
correct?
that's correct.
Yeah. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about your writing and your practice, what you maybe specialize in, and why might
Absolutely.
get a lot of people to know you?
Yeah. So I've been a clinical psychologist for 16 years plus. Um, I am new to writing. So I started writing my own story a few years ago with no intention of publishing or being public with it. It was really therapeutic for me. And I wrote a page a day for a year and then found myself essentially with a book. And so I first came to Substack to write because I had been guided there by a literary consultant who told me I needed a platform. And I didn't know what that was. And I'm not sure I totally know what that is still, but I didn't know what I was doing. I just started writing just little snippets about my life. And what I found was really an unexpected amount of connection. And
Mhm.
um, that's really why I've stayed. At this point, I'm not thinking about an audience. I'm really enjoying the interactions and meeting people who are like minded, who, I find the more I share, the more other people share. And that's just keeping me going. Um,
Well, it
so
seems like your writing and your voice really is resonating with a lot of people.
um, I I mean, I hope so. And certainly, you know, as I said, it feels very authentic, the connections. I write under the name The Therapist Who Came Undone, in part because that's how I identified myself when I started writing. But I stay anonymous because I do have an active practice and I share so much of my personal stories and thoughts and experiences, and as a clinician I like to be thoughtful about what I'm disclosing with the people I work with, and
Yeah.
that's the reason for the anonymity. um,
No, I really relate to that. So I often wish I could go back and do that, but I had already published a couple of books under my real name before
yes,
going in Substack, so there was really no going back and
yeah,
trying to create new identities. But I absolutely respect and understand that need, and it
yeah,
creates a
and I
protection
do
for you
think
to
there's
practice.
so much value in putting your whole self out there. um, And if I do end up publishing this book, it's out on submission right now, then I will probably attach my name to my writing. Um, but for now, this has felt like a comfortable way to just provide cushion to be honest,
Mhm.
right? That I don't
Yeah.
hold back because I don't worry about, how I'm going to impact the people I work with. I want that space to be about them, not about me.
Yeah. Yeah, I
I'll
found
cross
that,
that bridge.
yeah. Well, sometimes we write stories that are so universal and yet they feel so personal that I've had the experience of a client saying, "You wrote about me." And I'm like, "Oh my goodness. No, I didn't.
Yeah.
That's so many people." And so that's really an unfortunate thing where somebody can really feel their trust breached simply because, I mean, ideally, we're not looking up our therapist because that's such a risky territory. And it's something that we have to be careful with, but it's hard to completely insulate that when we do write under our name. So,
Absolutely, and I always work under the assumption that, that the people I work with are Googling me. I've Googled my own therapist, that curiosity makes sense, and there's so much
yeah,
information out there.
if you
Um,
put it publicly, you can't expect privacy.
exactly,
Mhm.
exactly.
Yeah. And so I know in my practice, I specialize in trauma. And what about you? What is your clinical specialty?
So I don't have a specialty. I work with adults. I used to work primarily with college students and graduate students, although
Mm,
I have found my practice aging with me. So
yeah.
I tend to work with adults typically about 10 years younger than I am, although there's plenty of variability in that. And I'm an integrative clinician, so I'm trained in different modalities, but I really
Mhm.
consider myself a pragmatist. So I'm working each new person I'm working with, I'm looking at who they are, what they need, what their experience has been in therapy,
Mm.
what they're coming in with, what they're motivated to work on, and really trying to tailor treatment to really the fit between their needs and how I like to work.
Mhm.
Um,
That makes sense. It's funny you mentioned working with college students. I love working with college students myself. It's such a great age where you've
yeah.
reached a certain intellectual maturity and you can really dive in deeply to the things before with so
Mhm.
much life ahead, before you've made, more mistakes. And I
Yeah.
just love that age. But it's so interesting you mentioned that because that's kind of what we're here to talk about today.
Yeah.
Because in addition to both being clinicians and writers, we both are launching sons into college. So we're both in that stage. And a really funny thing that I will share that we unexpectedly came upon is that um, our therapist who came undone has a son right now at the very small liberal arts college that my son was just accepted to. So we are going to be co-moms.
That's
Um,
right. It
it
is.
was really kind of a fun surprise.
It was a shocking discovery. We had connected in DMs and over the fact that our kids were going to college, and you had asked where my son was, and I thought, well, no one's ever heard of it, so I'll just throw it out there. And there we,
And I said, "Oh my gosh, that's 3 miles from my house,
yeah,
and my son is going there." So
yeah,
and has now been accepted. So a really funny surprise.
yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, our kiddos
Hopefully
are
I'm one
now
of
in
these.
touch.
Yeah, yeah, really fun. So, but a couple years apart. But you also have a son you're launching, we both have sons graduating this year and starting
Yes,
school,
yes.
in the fall. So doing
Right.
it
I
all
have
over
3
again.
boys, and,
Mhm.
one is a college freshman, one is a high school senior, and the other one is a little guy, who's just in the 1st
Mhm.
grade. So this is not my first time at the rodeo, but it feels
Yeah.
different, and I think it's different with
Mhm.
every kid, and every mom and dad.
Yeah, I think there's so much nuance here that maybe we can dig into a little bit about what that's like as a parent, launching a child. For me, I have only one child, and so it's first and last and empty nest all at once. So it's a really
Hu
big, that feels
Huge.
really big to me. Yeah.
It is really big.
And yet I wouldn't want to minimize like that any single child launching is not momentous. So yeah.
Yeah, well, right, and I mean, I have my two boys who are launched and launching couldn't be more
Mm.
different, and so the experience of sending each one off feels completely unique. So
Mm.
I'm taking this one as it comes, but
Yeah.
it's been challenging in a totally different way.
That seems like such wisdom is in parenting in general to not simply apply what worked for one child to the next and see them as individuals. And that applies in this
Yes, I
phase
did
as well.
that the
Right?
hard way, but
Yeah.
but I got there eventually.
Mm, mhm,
Um, and it's such a different experience when you only have one that right, that, like you said, the launch encompasses so much. It's
mhm.
not just the first time having this experience, but it's the last time you have this experience, um, and it's the empty nest.
Yeah, yeah, and, I don't know about you since we've both been practicing for some time, but I've worked with clients who've gone through this stage before me, and maybe you have, and one of the themes that often comes up is a sense of, like, identity, shifts in, like, "Who am I?" And I think it's always been important to me that my whole sense of self was not captured in being a mom because I knew it would be temporary and I'd have so much more life afterward, even though it was, like, I'm talking in past tense already, but like my
Yeah.
greatest joy, like this role is so meaningful. It's like it's brings so much purpose and it's yeah, my greatest joy, but it can't be my whole self. And still there is an identity shift of going from being an active um parent at home to a different sort of parent, I guess. I wonder
Yeah.
if you could kind of think about what that's like for you,
Yeah.
doing
So
both.
my experience, I mean, just to share a little bit, if that's okay,
Mm,
about my kid who has launched, because
mhm,
that's where my experience is. he had a really tough time in COVID. He's a joy, a great, great kid. Um, but we had a big family loss when he was 11 years old and was recovering from that. And then COVID hit. He was in ninth grade at the time, or he was in eighth grade at the time. And there was sort of a slow and then a fast unraveling. And my husband and I made a really tough choice to send him to wilderness therapy and then residential treatment when he was 15. So, and that was three-quarters of the way across the country. So we had this false launch, I guess, right? He wasn't launched by any measure. He needed more support. And um, as you can imagine, right, that was incredibly painful for all of us. And we had no guarantee of a positive outcome. We had no idea where it was going to land. He came back. I mean, there were plenty of bumps along the way, but, looking back, I can see the slope was a good trajectory, right? I didn't always feel that in the moment. But for me, and I think for my husband as well, launching him to college because he had already been away from home for a year. And then he came back and went to boarding school for one semester a few states away that was his request, and then moved closer to home, but still did a 5-day boarding school and came and lived with us on the weekends, and spent summers with us. But he had been gone for so long, and it had been so fraught sending him away that sending him to college, even though it was all the way across the country, I didn't feel conflict. I was so proud of him. He was thriving. He was, he reclassed in high school. He took an extra year of high school so that he could get into a school that he wanted to go to. And so he was off to his first choice college and was so excited. And so sending him just felt joyful, right? This is what
That's the word that was in my mind, joy, in contrast to fear and
yes,
concern, just a joyful launch.
exactly. This is what it's supposed to feel like. And he had done so much of that identity shift in high school, right? And
Coming into
changed
himself.
it changed his relationship with all of us at home. It was just, I think it felt much more adult than a typical teenager. Like there was no, that phrase soiling the nest, that kids often, when they're getting ready to leave, will just push against their parents because they're starting to launch. They want to be independent, and there's this push pull, and that just didn't happen because frankly he soiled the nest years before, and, and we recovered from that.
So he
So
was kind of like in that young adult stage where you're starting to like really build an adult relationship with your parent before he even left for college.
exactly. And so sending him was okay, and he's delightfully in touch. We get the phone calls on his walk to classes, and whenever he has downtime, like we all do, he picks up his phone. So I feel like that experience was unique, and that now with my second son, who's just had a very even path, I'm getting the experience that other parents are getting, which is like the excitement for him and, the sadness over his leaving. He's been a fixture in our house.
Yeah.
So it's a different ball game this go round.
Yeah. So much more of the traditional shift in your relationship with him, his identity as the minor child versus the very, very, very young adult.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
your identity shift as in his life, at least you still have this young boy at home, but as being that kind of active parent.
Yes, exactly. Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Oh, I just said there's that. Oh, I think I might not have put on Do Not Disturb because we toggled it on and off. Let me try to fix that.
Okay.
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm not going to interrupt it. Yeah. So we just said like you're changing in your relationship with him as well as far as being a different kind of role as a mom
Yes,
with
exactly.
him. Mhm.
Yeah. And I'm curious, I know you're the interviewer, but of course I'm a therapist, so I'm curious about you.
Yeah.
Um, I'm curious your experience getting ready, to send your son off into the world.
Yeah, it's been an interesting. I mean, you and I have talked about this privately, but over the last couple of months, not knowing if he was going to go to a school he was accepted to in Canada or a school that's literally 3.5 miles from our house. So he
Yeah.
couldn't. Those were his two of his top three choices, and those were two he was accepted into. So um, playing with very different scenarios in my mind. And so now it feels a little bit like every 4 years he shifted schools. There was like one school for 4 years, and then there was
Mhm.
another year, another school, and then there was COVID, so he didn't get all 5 years there. And then there was 4 years at a high school, and now there'll be 4 years here. And it's just kind of like bouncing around the community. So it feels different, but he will be living on campus, which is very, very different.
Yeah.
Um, and I think, we've had a very good, close relationship, perhaps having only one child.
Mhm.
And in his first 8 years or so, his father was almost always gone. Like he'd work such long days and he would travel a lot that I remember my son saying, "Oh, it's nice that dad comes to visit." I'm like, "No, he lives here.
Yeah.
He actually lives here." So it was really just like him and me for a really long time.
Yeah.
And and as like adolescence is, as you know, like a time of naturally separation and individuation and the gradual pulling apart. And the beginning of the school year, he started driving himself to school, and
Mhm.
which is something I pushed him to learn to do because I think it's a life skill that you should have.
Yeah.
Easier to learn when you've got a parent there to teach you. But it also is like all these little heartbreaks along the way, right? Of like, oh, I
I
just our talks in the
Yeah.
car.
And
Which
it
funny was actually further away than his college is, like from our home was a further drive.
Oh, really? But you will not see him
I
regularly,
won't be
right?
seeing
He'll
him.
be he'll be integrated into his own community.
Yeah.
It is, I mean, I think you're right to feel it as a big shift. Um,
Mhm.
and I do think, maybe this is a cliche that parenting is often described as like from day one, you're letting go. But I think
Mhm.
that's so true. That's what you're describing, right? The day they
Yeah.
get their driver's license and they're like, see ya. Um,
Mhm.
it's you lose those. I used to love driving my kids. I mean, I hated driving my kids places, but I also loved driving my kids places because you're in a car, you're not facing each other. Like it almost
Mhm.
simulates therapy, right? And or analysis.
Oh, and for boys especially,
Mhm.
connection works so well when you're both looking ahead, and I don't know why, it just seems to.
Yes, agreed.
Oh.
Or you're driving a whole bunch of them around, and it's like they don't even know you're there. They're just talking
Mm,
freely, and you get this little window into their inner world. And right the day they get their driver's license, poof, like that piece
yeah.
gone. And right there are lots of points like that along the way. And I think college is probably the biggest one that we experience as parents and that we
Yeah.
experience as emerging adults. Um, it's a
I
big deal.
remember when my son was a toddler and I was in this like mom's group and the kids were off there with their childcare and we were talking and there was an older mom and she said, "What do you think is the hardest stage of parenthood?" And since we're all with these littles, we're all like toilet training, sleep training, all this kind of stuff. And she's like, "Mm-mm." She's like, "It's when they leave home." And I was like, she's right. I could feel that ring of truth, even though it was so far away. And I'm kind of glad she said that because I felt like that stayed with me all these years, making me go like, I'm treasuring this. I'm treasuring this. But now here I am on the cusp of it. And I feel like I remember at 18 months before August when college will start. So sometime last year, starting to use months, just like when you're a toddler and you're like, they're 18 months. So it was like, I have 18 months left with him. I have 17, I have 16, So
Yeah.
like 4.5, like now we're counting the half. So it feels so big and
Yeah.
hard and exciting. And it's like hard because I need to manage my own, like, oh, so that I can be excited for it with him, which is really interesting. There's such different experiences for the parent and the kid.
Absolutely, it is, and, I mean, it's interesting because I'm gonna be very real here. When my
Yeah.
older kids were little, I gotta say I probably fantasized about them leaving for college for a lot of
But you had
years.
multiple, which I think is an entirely different experience.
Yeah, I had 2 boys 16 months apart, and my oldest who, I think probably the old term was a spirited child.
Mhm.
He had so much energy, absolute was diagnosed with ADHD when he was 8.
Mhm.
My husband and I worked full time, like, there were a lot of years that felt like a grind,
Mhm.
and, then you right, so I did not know or even think to try and cherish that time. Like, I was so excited with each phase. I'm like, "Done, check, moving on." Um, and then we had this, I mean, not to get too heavy, but we had this big loss in our family. I've written a lot about it. We there was we lost my husband's sister and her husband and their 3 sons in a plane crash. At the time, I had 2 boys, and it reworked our priorities, and that's really when my husband and I decided to have a 3rd child, which was never on our radar, and now we have this little, joy bringer, he's 7 now, and my experience with him tracks so much with what you're describing,
Mhm.
of being present and being able to like, I can remember sitting and nursing him and thinking, like, "Just soak this in. You get to do this every day. Enjoy every moment of it." Uh, and I mean, I couldn't enjoy every moment of it because 'cause I'm human, but I enjoyed so many more moments, and it's also given me so much more ability to stay present with the older kids too, and
Mhm.
really just, um, again, not every moment, but many moments.
Yeah, like both can be true, right? My son didn't sleep through the night till he was 4, and he woke up every hour to 2 hours until he was 3.5. So,
Wow.
I'm not saying I loved those years, and yet, it's a both and, right? Like,
Yeah.
God, well, I wouldn't go back for another night of having him sleep in my arm because he wouldn't sleep anywhere else, right?
Mhm.
That's sweet, and yet there's enough of a stage, and 4 years of that stage is a lot,
Yeah,
or like when I remember the last time I changed his diaper and like I used to kiss his little belly right before I, you know, bind him all up and everything.
yeah.
And I remember that last little kiss and then disassembling the changing table and being like, I'm not going to miss the diapers, but I'm
Right.
kind of going to miss that little kiss.
Yeah.
So there is something to the both and
Yeah.
the holding on to the sweetness and being ready for the next stage. And so that's something I'm trying to keep in my mind as I'm anticipating this stage beginning is yes, there's a lot I'm going to miss. I'm going to miss just like sitting on the couch while he's doing his homework and I'm doing my thing, and then we're not really talking, but just that sense of together. I'm going to miss
Yes.
a lot of things. But what can I look forward to in the next stage? How, rather than just seeing the absence and like, you know, we've recently been through a really significant loss in our for our family, and so this year does feel like a lot of subtraction and a lot of loss. And so I'm trying to reframe that to okay, but what is the next chapter? And it doesn't have to outweigh what feels lost or what is changing,
Right. It's
but
and
how can it
both.
also?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I can give you some hope on that
Okay.
front,
Yes.
um, because I have to say we are flying out to go, just as you're flying away, we're flying in to go visit our
Need a
son
place to stay in
for
my house. Yeah.
yeah, for maybe we should. Um, but it's I have found it so delightful to hear from him. I mean, again, some of it is our history, so seeing him thrive, um, given what he's been through, just is never gonna get old for me. I'm so proud of him,
Mhm.
so excited
Yeah.
for him, but even that aside, when he calls and he wants to share a paper he's written or a conversation he's had with a professor or what he's singing with his a cappella group, he'll send us I'm not very musical, my husband is, but he'll send us the music he's singing, just seeing him engaged in his own life is awesome. And then when we spend time together, it I mean, I am still his mom to be sure, and when he, got stuck at the airport over spring break, he was calling us at midnight, like, we're still there as parents, but there's a whole new relationship that's evolving, and it's fun. Like, you put all this time and effort and energy into, um, trying to be a good parent to your kid, and then they become adults, and you just get to enjoy it, right? And,
Mhm.
it's I have found it really delightful, and in many ways, I think I've always been close to my oldest who's away, but in many ways, I feel closer to him because,
Mhm.
he's choosing to call
A
and
very
to
intentional
know
communication.
what's going on. He's not stuck with us. He's
Mhm.
opting in, which is, a pretty wonderful feeling as a parent.
That's really precious. I love that. That really intentional communication.
Yes, exactly.
Wow.
So, but now I'm doing it again and I'm having, well, different feelings, but big feelings
Mhm.
all over, right? Because my kid who is on my couch with me most nights is leaving, and that feels hard in a very different way.
Mhm. Yeah. So how do you feel, um I mean, this might be a bigger shift because you said your son was living at the home a lot of the time before he left, your older son. But how do you feel it impacts your relationship with your other children as each one leaves and maybe their experience of having an older sibling watch?
Oh, that's an interesting question. And again, I feel like my experience has been so unique because
Um,
my oldest, when he went away, it was in the first time, it was in crisis. And
mhm,
um that his my middle son, his brother who's close in age was in s 8th grade at the time, and I think and he was very close. They were very close, and so he had a
mhm.
really hard time with his departure, and it brought us much closer together because suddenly my husband and I were emotionally more freed up and just we
Mhm,
had more time to give to
mhm.
him. So he was kind of the kid who he was always fine. And so, we had the baby and we had his brother who was struggling and he just didn't get a lot of us. I mean, we
The whole
loved
middle
him.
kid stuff.
We gave him as much as we could, but suddenly he was really getting us and we were present with him. And so I think that was actually really healthy for him. Now when the oldest left for college, in some ways, right, for him too, we were used to not having him around, but it was wonderful and hard in a different way. Um, for the little guy, it's been surprisingly okay, both times. He loves his older brother so much, he just worships him, but they talk on FaceTime, and he just gets he's at college, and he comes home for break, and
Mhm.
he misses him, but, um, the little one takes he takes plenty of our time and energy and always has, and he's quite comfortable being in that role.
Mhm. Oh, it's amazing.
Yeah.
One thing I was thinking about with this conversation launching kids is how that can impact our attachment systems. The secure attachment, the anxious attachment, the ambivalent, the avoidant, and thinking about different clients I've had, my own experience, yours, clients you may have seen.
Mhm.
And I think that's something that's really important for people, for ourselves to be aware of. Like if we are more of an anxious attachment type person under times of stress, that's going to come out more. And this may be experienced as a time of stress. And so does that make us like cling or overreact to distance that's natural? Or, an avoidant attacher might actually get irritated by the intrusions of their child's texting when you didn't expect it or communicating in times that aren't under your control.
Mhm.
Um, so go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, I think, again, like my experience with my oldest shaped so much of how I parent. So I was definitely um, enmeshed, for lack of a better word, with my oldest, and um, with his experience going into treatment. My husband and I did a lot of work on our parenting.
Mm.
I mean, like a lot. We've had a lot of therapy, and um, I think it's helped for us personally with him launching, really understanding that he's in charge of his life, and we can, set our own boundaries with him and be clear in communicating them. But he's going to make mistakes because everybody makes mistakes. I'm sure you've made mistakes. I've definitely made mistakes. Um, but I think, had I not done all of that work, I think I would find it very hard to let go of the control and the worry and the anxiety, um,
Mhm.
because it is scary to, when you're used to being there and being able to, you know, help smooth the path, which
Mhm.
arguably you shouldn't be doing before they leave for school,
No plow parenting.
um, but it's painful to not be able to do that. And I actually am
Mhm.
very grateful for all of the help and support we had along the way. I think it's made, for me, launching the kids easier because I
Mm.
genuinely believe that it's their life to live. And now,
Mm.
talk to me again when they're in the middle of making a mistake and they call me. That's another story. But um and maybe that's the take home. There's no perfect way. And I think um for all of us at certain ages, depending on our own history, our kids become mirrors for us. And so
Mhm.
what they're
That's right.
experiencing may bring up what we've experienced at a similar age. And leaving for college is definitely part of that. And so our own histories, I think, very much shape our reactions you know, to their departure.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and I think the best we can do is try and be aware of that. And as you said, you don't want your feelings of loss to get in the way of his experience and his growth.
Mhm.
And I think as parents, that's probably the best we can do, is try and be aware of it and um,
Mhm.
face it ourselves so that we're not accidentally putting it on them.
Yeah, and even I try to communicate it directly, and I make jokes about it, like, referencing a TV show we might watch together, something with some overbearing mom, like, "Oh, that's gonna be me,"
Yeah.
But I'll also tell him in full seriousness, like, I'm gonna want because he's nearby, right? I'm like, "I'm gonna wanna see you every weekend, but you're gonna need to tell me what's enough and what's too much and what you need, because I want you connecting on campus and going to whatever activities, so,
Yeah.
like, you're always welcome. If you're just like, he's very introverted and, like, if you're overstimulated and you need some quiet time, like, we're here.
Yeah.
Um, or even, like, picking up his meds, I'm like, I can teach you how to do that, or I can just drop him off as an excuse to see you?"
Yes. Well, that
But
well, that is lovely and also really actually quite challenging that that option is there, right? Uh,
yeah,
I don't have that option, and I'm not gonna
no.
have it with my middle son either. He's closer, but he's still a flight away. I have told him I might move into his dorm room with him, but well, I will try not to do that, because that would be awkward. Um, but,
But I know for me, that is, like, a challenge that I need to,
yeah.
despite access, allow him to come into his own person because that is why he's living on campus. That is what this stage is about, and so that'll be an interesting thing to figure out how to navigate. I'm in a Facebook group for parents of kids going to school and university, sorry, in Canada, because that was, 50-50 shot of what was gonna happen,
Yeah.
and it's always interesting, the questions that come up is like, "My child is sick for the first time, what do I do?" Like, you're in Texas and he's
Yeah.
in Toronto or wherever,
Yeah.
and
Do
learning to
nothing.
be like, they're gonna be okay. Text them advice, check in on them, but,
Yeah.
so that there's so much to navigate in learning how to kind of like let go and empower that young adult, I think.
Yeah. Well, it's I'm can't believe I haven't brought this up until this point, but I actually spent several years working in a college counseling center. So I've
Oh,
also
yeah.
seen it and I had young kids at the time, so it wasn't,
Mhm.
I wasn't relating to it, but I was observing it,
Mhm.
how different parents respond, and it seemed like the kids who really, um, struggled less had parents that were able to let go, right?
Mhm.
And let and that's not to say they weren't visiting their parents, but
Mhm.
that they were leading
They
their
were the parent was hovering.
yeah,
Because when we do that, we undermine their confidence, right? We
right,
send the message, "You can't handle this." And
exactly.
that's not going to, allow them to grow through challenges, which is where most growth comes in, is figuring it out.
Yeah. And
Mm.
that is painful as a parent, and again, I learned that I did a lot of smoothing of the path. There's a saying, that I learned when my son was in wilderness therapy, that has stuck with me, which is, prepare don't prepare the path for your child, prepare your child for the path, right?
Mm.
And,
I like
I
that.
think about that all the time in parenting my little one, that they need to be ready for what's going to hit them when they leave
Mhm.
home, and you don't do that by making sure everything is clear for them because that's not how it works in the real world.
And it's not something you can realistically continue to do, so,
Right, right,
yeah, but it
right.
wouldn't be
So
for
we
the
have
rest of
control over the path.
but I love that. Yeah, that's really wise.
Yeah,
Mm.
there were a lot of gems from that time, which I did not appreciate necessarily in the moment, but I have
Hope you carry forward.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
So from your, increased experience in this stage, what are some tips that you might want to share with me and everybody listening who will listen later on how to adjust personally and how to really, support your young person in their adjustment?
I mean, I think in terms of our own adjustment as parents, I don't know that I have much to give you because I think you're doing it, right? Setting yourself
Mhm.
up. Um, and I want to be clear, like, I don't know that I have the answers. Like, I have what has been helpful to me. Um, and, and I'm just navigating it, right? I still have a
Mhm.
little one at home, which is a different experience. Like I'm still in the thick of parenting. I'm
Mhm.
expecting him to bust in here any minute and interrupt the live. Um, so, I think the thing that's most important that you hit on is you have maintained identity outside of parenting as well as an identity as a parent because you're going to keep your identity as a parent. I mean, I have a lot of friends who are further along the path than I am, and all of them talk about how parenting continues to be just as intense, right?
Mm.
Until they're done.
Mm.
But your time is spent differently, right? And um so I think having things that are important to you outside of parenting is
Mhm.
essential. And engaging in those things and like living that part of your life, I think there's
Mhm.
freedom and joy in that too, right? As you said, like there's joy runs alongside loss, and you
Mhm.
can't have one without the other. But
Yeah.
trying to stay present for the parts that are good, um, and you
And
know,
one thing I've done along with that this year, is and I kinda waited because, like, part of me is like, like, I'm so aware of how little time I have left with him, but on the other hand, I don't want this big vacuum when he leaves, and so I actually started up something new, December, January, started taking a couple of dance classes, which is something I've always wanted to do. It's just for me. In fact,
it's
was
awesome.
kind of almost like practically a secret, so now everybody knows. I haven't even
Yeah.
told my friends. But just this little thing I'm doing. And, this idea of like, maybe I know my life will continue to shift and how I use my time after he's gone, but starting to just sort of fill in a little bit more time and be okay with that. And that's something that I can continue on, after he's gone too.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think if you right, it gives you space to build your other relationships, whether that's with your spouse or with friends,
Mm,
um, that there's right, parenting when your kids are in your house is so consuming, and being able to take the time to figure out what brings you pleasure now, because it's gonna look very different. At least for me, it looks very different than what brought me pleasure before I had kids. And
yeah.
for me, right, my oldest departure, my middle one getting ready to launch, has coincided with my finding writing, which has been wonderful for me because that's, where I like to put my time and energy when I'm not with my little person or working. Um, and so, I think I feel very lucky that I found a thing I feel energized about. Um,
Mhm,
but finding it doesn't have to be a thing, right? But
mhm.
finding a way to spend your time that feels fulfilling, um,
Yeah.
rather than
Yeah,
waiting to hear.
yeah. It's funny, my writing, I've kind of paused a bit with, again, that, like, awareness of time simply because when I've been under contract on books before, it was so all-consuming, like,
Yeah.
sometimes past midnight, and I'm like, "I'm gonna wait till he's launched," and then I've got that to return to before I, get this other one pitched. But, there's something you said I wanted to circle back to. You just kinda
Yeah.
touched on the marriage aspect, and I think that's really key because for a lot of people, um, having that child or children in the marriage can be very distracting in a way, and
Mm,
sometimes when the children are all gone, the issues between you might really come to the surface or the lack of connection if that's been allowed to atrophy over the years. So it's something if people who are listening are still like some time away from the complete empty nest that I'm staring down, it's important to pay attention to that. Like, what are these dynamics and how can I nurture that if I want our marriage to flourish? How can I also like pour into that marriage? And so when I talked earlier about like what I'm looking forward to in the next chapter, I was actually with my husband for a decade before we had our son. And so I have the strong memory of it just being the two of us that I can kind of go back to and be like, ooh,
mhm.
there was some goodness in that too.
Yeah.
That, I'm looking forward to being able to just take trips or, maybe we can go together to do like certain things that we might not have done before because of work hours or whatever, everything being divided into work hours and parenting hours. And so, uh, figuring out how are you going to nurture that, or are there issues that you've been able to avoid by almost kind of triangulating the kids into it that maybe need some attention, maybe some couples
Mhm.
therapy, maybe some personal work?
Absolutely. I mean, my husband and I joke all the time, like, are we gonna have anything to talk about? Like when we're not talking about the kids,
Yeah.
And again, like that's with one still at home. But
Mhm.
it was, I will say, when my oldest left for treatment, he had taken up so much of the energy in the house
Mhm.
that it was a huge adjustment. I mean, for all of us, so it wasn't just the two of us at the time, but we had to navigate a whole new dynamic, right? Everything
Mhm.
was just like whoosh, deflated and was quiet. And, um, my son, even before he left, he took up a lot of the oxygen, but he also is hilarious and
Mhm.
loud and engaging. And so it was like,
The whole atmosphere shifted.
what are we doing without this kid here,
Mhm.
so I think that's a really good point, and it can go in so many directions, right? Because there's also really time to connect again. um,
Mhm.
and I think it's you have to discover what's there, what's changed. It's definitely going to be different, um,
Mhm.
but it can be, I mean, it's not gonna be any one thing. I was gonna say it could be good different or hard different, but it's probably good and hard different.
Yeah. Yeah. So just something to be mindful of.
Mhm.
And then there's always people who really are just waiting it out till the kids are gone and they know what they're doing with their marriage afterward, and that's a different
Well,
story too.
my husband and I joke that once we launch our second, we're just going to like go on a retirement tour with our youngest. He's just he's just gonna have to live the retire because we were older when right. I was 41 when we had him. My husband was 51, so we live a weird little. My husband is retired, so we live we're going to live a weird life with our little one. And we'll see. It's like a, psychological experiment. But I guess having kids is always a little bit of an experiment.
This is true. There's no roadmap. And it's like almost like this life here, we're trying to create a roadmap. And what we're really highlighting is how unique it is for every family, every young person, every mother or father who's going through this stage.
And just bringing that full circle to what we were talking about when we were talking about our therapy practices, that I think that's true of almost everything in life and every relationship. That um, I I don't know about you. I read 0 parenting books before I had kids, which arguably was a mistake. But arguably it was a good choice because nobody, you know, no two people are the same, and their experiences and needs are different. So there really isn't a map, but I do think there's value in collective experience, right? And
Yeah, yeah. Like I had not also read parenting books because I actually didn't plan this pregnancy. And I guess you have 9 months to read books, or at least
yeah,
8 or so.
yeah,
So I figured I'll read them at each stage as they go. I'll read the potty training book when I get there, and then I found I didn't have time to read. I would just read blogs,
right.
which was fine. But what I did have was that not every parent has is a background in like a bachelor's in human development and and a master's in family therapy, and got my doctorate later. But that like talking about universals, and that I found that really useful is just drawing back on that developmental background. Like there are stages where there's needs. This is the formation stage. This is identity formation stage. And like right now with adolescence and launching, it's that individuation stage. And so
Yeah.
having an awareness of some universals can really inform our parenting while staying so flexible to the individual needs of each child.
I love that model, right? That yes, awareness of sort of the universality, but also that word flexibility, like that's what lights me up. That we have to be flexible in all the. I mean, we don't have to be. We benefit from being flexible. I think
And they
our kids benefit from our being flexible because they need. I mean, I have a window into this because my 2 older kids are so close together in age and so different in every way that um you know I've learned that what works for one just absolutely doesn't work for the other,
yeah.
except when it does, right? That you're learning as you go in every stage. So yes, holding an awareness but being flexible, I think, is key.
hmm Yeah, kids have that tendency to be opposite. Like, oh, you took that role, I will go with this one then.
Yes, that is true. And some of it, I mean, now that's a whole nurture nature debate, of course. But some of it, I'm always amazed that if when I look back, I feel like I can see their different personalities almost from jump. They're
I mean,
just
there's a basic temperament that they may have, like
yeah,
being intense or low, easygoing, right?
yes,
And
they're
push them to
wired
be
different.
intense.
Um, Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the more I observe, the more I mean, it's a mixture, of course, but the more I observe, the more I think, yeah, we have less control than we think we do. There's so much built in, you know.
I know what you're saying about not, before I had my child, I thought, well, I'm not going to be one of those parents that's tied to, making everything with their kid. I bought a pack and play and like this little sleeper bassinet that I was going to take to my friend's house so he could sleep while we hung out, and then we'd drive him home because he'd sleep in the car seat. And he was like, no, I'm not doing any of those things. I will only sleep in your arms, in the bed, at home, never in the car, like every child in the world, never in anybody else's environment. I'm like, okay, cool, cool. So I became the actual opposite, which I think is just the irony of life teaching you, like, don't be so arrogant and don't ever judge somebody else's parenting because you don't know what their child is like.
Yeah. Yeah, do you know what? That advice holds the whole way through. I feel like that's great advice for launching your kid too.
Mhm.
Like, you just have to stay open to it and don't be arrogant because you have no idea how it's gonna go.
Yeah.
Uh, I think parenting is probably the most humbling thing that we do, um, or that we can do.
Yeah. And a real privilege, I find.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely a real privilege.
So, I don't know if there you had any last word of wisdom you wanted to share, because I know we should probably wrap this up soon, as much
Okay.
as I feel like I could talk to you for hours.
Me too.
Yeah.
Um, Last words of I don't know that I have more wisdom. I think I like your wisdom, which is that it's a privilege to parent, even when sometimes it's a real giant pain to
Mhm.
and it's a privilege to get to launch your child, right? It's not one
Mhm.
everybody gets. And I know myself, I didn't know for my oldest whether we would ever have a healthy launch. And so
Mhm.
um, I feel that privilege all the time that he's out there in the world finding his way.
Mhm.
I mean, what more could we want for our kid, right? Be good, do good, and try and have some fun. So, I think as a parent, as much as you can, as painful as it is, to also make sure you step back and, you know, enjoy it too.
Yeah. I think, the heartbreak is is a sign of how lucky we are, right? To have somebody that we have this relationship with, to have the opportunity to love somebody so much for a full 18 or 19 years.
Hmm.
And so just a
And
reframe that I think
I
may be
mean,
helpful.
not to be too emotional, but you get to keep loving them. Like that doesn't it doesn't change. They're not in your house and they're not maybe like taking up quite as much space in your brain, but they take up the same amount of space in your heart.
Yeah.
Uh, and that just doesn't change. So it is a different stage and that means adjustment and it also means different privileges. So
Mhm.
yeah, I think that's maybe the best thing I can say, and I'm saying it as much to myself because I have so much sadness about my second son leaving, that also is joyful.
Yeah, such a mix.
Hmm.
Well, so I'm so glad we got to have this chat today. Where can people find you if they're joining from knowing me?
I Right under the name The Therapist Who Came Undone. And you can Google that. I think it's also the other title is never mind. I'm not sure. I think it's Being Real. But but look for me at The Therapist Who Came Undone. That will get you to me.
And anybody who is watching this on replay will be able to probably just click a link. So from me,
Yes.
from your name.
That.
And I was going to ask this earlier and I didn't, but I don't know if it's a surprise or if you want to share what the theme of your book is.
Oh, it's not a surprise. It's a memoir. It is called, well, I think it's going to be called The Trace We Leave Behind. I
Yeah.
don't know how much control I have over that. And it's really, I would say the story of my coming undone, and putting myself back together. Um,
Mm.
it spans a lot of years, but the theme is really radical honesty and um, learning to tell my story and how being authentic is really what led to ultimately more integration. And I would never say, I'm done now, right? We're
Yeah.
all coming undone in ways, and that's a lifelong process. But that is what it is about. It is out on submission, so I don't know if it will be published or not. Um, but
Well, I believe in it. I believe in the story in your writing. And for anybody who hasn't spent time reading your work on Substack, highly recommend it. It's so lovely and
thank you.
readable.
And it's been such a
Mhm.
delight to connect with you on here, but before we were on here, I think I probably was your fan long before you knew who I was or read my writing, and that was just lovely to be able to connect, and find we have so much in common.
Yeah, it's been wonderful, and I look forward to continuing to get to know you, and maybe on one of these trips out here, we'll actually connect live, like,
Yes,
not
as
live,
long
live,
as
but,
you
like,
stay in
at a
town,
coffee shop.
the
Yeah.
next time I come in town, we will absolutely
I know,
be getting
such terrible timing. I'm leaving town, but yeah, and everybody who's joining me from the Therapist to Him Undone side, I write mental health musings on Substack, so I would invite you to come check me out and join with me there, and, love to stay in touch. So,
I
thank you,
highly
everybody,
recommend.
for joining us. Oh, thank you.
Okay, so good to
All
talk.
right. You
Bye.
too. Have a great evening.
You
Bye.
too. Bye.
Bye, everybody.